So, welcome to our podcast. I can't think of anyone who has done more to improve sales training effectiveness or who knows more about it than our guest today, Robin Hoyle. Robin is the head of learning innovation for Huthwaite International, the author of 2 books on learning and development, and a popular podcast host. He's won several awards in the UK and worldwide, and works to seamlessly integrate synchronous and asynchronous digital delivery with group sessions and workplace transfer tools and platforms. So we're going to learn a lot today about how to make sales training work. So Robin, welcome.
Thank you.
If we could start, I'm not sure everybody knows about Huthwaite, so maybe you could give us a quick overview of Huthwaite International and what you're all about.
Sure. So Huthwaite International has been around now for 50 years. I haven't been involved all of that time, I hasten to
No.
add. But broadly speaking, Huthwaite International started out of a research project. And we asked ourselves a very simple question, which is, what do successful people do that unsuccessful people do less frequently or more frequently? What are the different behaviors that they use? And we focused fairly early doors on the idea of sales training. And we were the originators of, and still own the copyright for, spin selling, which is probably the most researched and the most widely used sales approach, sales behaviors that people use within particularly business-to-business selling. And since that time, we've continued to grow and develop the business such that we are now active in most of the countries in the world. We deliver our training in more than 20 languages.
Wow.
Worldwide. We work with large organizations, primarily within the business-to-business environment, but we also work with some smaller organizations as well. We're about across our entire network of delivery organizations, some of which are licensees, some of which are employees, around about 200 and odd trainers in those different languages around the world. And we work with some of the very large organizations that people will know and some of the very large organizations that strangely people don't know. And I've got to admit, neither do we until we get the opportunity to work with them.
Yeah.
And you suddenly find that there's a multi-billion-dollar business that you've never even heard of. But yeah, so that's what we do.
Wow.
And over recent times, we've moved from traditional approach to monetizing our intellectual property, I suppose. So we own the research. The best ways of earning money out of that is to train other people about what we found. And traditionally, we used to, lock people in conference rooms for a week and teach them stuff.
Yeah.
But over the past few years, and to a certain extent accelerated by the pandemic and the recent challenges that we've had, we've moved to a learning journey model, which you'll be familiar with. So we use the Promote platform as a mechanism for enabling people to collaborate as they go through their learning journeys. And now what we talk about is we say, look, in order to learn some of the stuff that we do, it will take you around 7 or 8 weeks before you've kind of got it under your belt and you're ready to go and practice within a business as usual setting, of which only 2 days equivalent will be in the classroom.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that's the approach that we take. So that might be a number of virtual sessions. It might be 2 days in a conference room somewhere. But it will be about developing a set of skills and behaviors over a period of weeks, because we're helping people to adopt new habits, and that takes time.
Okay. So I know I'd heard of you for many years. I'd heard of Huthwaite, and what you're saying that really distinguishes you, research-based, for one.
Yeah.
So you've got evidence to back up. Somebody says, how come you taught me to do this? You say, well, let's take a look at the evidence. So you've got that. Yeah. And certainly the track record speaks for itself. It must be good, or you wouldn't have this sort of endurance in the field and as many customers as you do. So you've mentioned that you use learning journeys and you use the Promote platform. I think I've got the answer to this already, but I've heard you make a statement before that sales training often suffered from what you called the pharmacy approach. Say just a couple of words about what's that pharmacy approach mean anyway?
Well, you know the situation when you go and see your doctor or whatever, and they give you a course of medication. They get you to stick your tongue out, and you go, oh yeah, I can see what the problem is, and they give you a course of medication, and they say, so this is what they want you to do, and you must finish the course. Well, sales managers and the people who commission sales training programs pretty reluctant to let their people out of their sight, frankly. They don't want them off the road and away from customers. They want them in a training room. So the only time, oftentimes, that they come to us to say, can you help us with our sales performance, is when things have got bad somewhere down the line. Something's gone wrong. The targets are not being met, whatever it is. And therefore, their salespeople need to be cured.
Mm.
And the idea of finishing the course, well, it kind of depends what you mean by a course. So, it's quite clear if somebody gives you tablets for 7 days, you take them for the whole 7 days. But if you're finishing a course and there is a period of attendance where you go to that conference room and you stay overnight and there's a travel bill to go with it and all the rest of it, that feels like it's done and dusted. And we're not in the business of curing people. I can't give you, a magic solution to that, some kind of remedy which will mean that you're able to go out there and be a wonderful salesperson, having not been performing particularly well before.
Right.
So we've got to deal with that.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge for us, is to change mindset, shift the mindset of the people commissioning the training to go, it's not just going to happen in the classroom.
Right. No magic pills.
That's right.
Talking about complex behaviors, they're going to take time to change, and it's going to be, this treatment's not just sit back and take the medication. It's really get in there and work hard and practice. So, Robin, you mentioned that the behaviors you're teaching are research-based, and it is, your training focuses on those behaviors, but it's not just any old behaviors. Can you touch briefly on one or two of the things that behavioral research has identified that might strike people as counterintuitive, or, wow, that's not the way we've looked at it before ourselves?
Well, if you take the classic, which is that when people join a new organization within the sales customer-facing role, they're taught all about the products or services that the organization supplies.
Yeah.
And very often, and particularly when we're talking business to business or we're talking about new technology, that can be quite complex. There's a lot of technical information to take on there. You've got to learn all about this product and why the 2000 is different from the 2001 is different from the 2005. So you've got to kind of look at all of these differences and be able to almost recite those in your sleep in a way. So the focus tends to be very much around products.
Yes.
And what we found is that when people talk a lot about their products, that's about the least convincing behavior that any salesperson can use, because they tend to talk about features. And we know all about this within the sales training world. You can talk about features of a product, advantages of a product, benefits. The focus is all about the features, what it is. And because of that, they're less successful, or they're successful when they then have overcome all of the objections that they get from customers. So we're trying to change that behavior first and foremost, to say, look, we know that features have low persuasive power. Even successful sellers use them. Don't get me wrong, that there will be some behaviors which successful sellers will use, where they'll talk about the feature of a product, but they use it in a particular way at a particular time. Yes. Okay. It's still not very convincing. It's still not persuasive, but it's combined with other things, which means that it becomes more persuasive. Okay. So first thing that we've got to do is to say, look, it's not that your product knowledge is wrong, but your product knowledge is a start point for doing something else. And we need to limit the amount of repetition and pitching that people do about their product, because it doesn't work.
That makes sense. And you said some people maybe could do that product training in their sleep. They probably can put their client to sleep telling them all about it. I'm sure, like you say, they've got to be well-versed in the product. Certainly they have to be able to answer a question about it. But
of course they do.
If all they do is talk about the product, they're not going to close a sale. So that's one of the bad habits. How about another one? What are some of the other sort of myth behaviors that people would know about? This is pretty fascinating.
Well, let's talk specifically about the area that we focus around, which is around verbal behaviors. So there's 3 verbal behaviors that I can immediately think about. First of all, people get promoted into a sales role because they're good at speaking, the gift of the gab. Yeah, they're really good at talking to other people. And what we found in our research is a very simple thing to measure, in actual fact, that successful sellers have significantly less airtime than their customers in those conversations.
Oh,
So the first thing is actually being able to talk a lot, and particularly to talk about your product a lot, linking back to what we just talked about, is actually not an indicator of someone who's going to be successful at selling. So we want people who can ask questions rather more than they can just tell people stuff.
So it's
so
not
that's the first one.
Yeah, not the gift of gab then. Good.
No, absolutely not.
All right.
The second one is that we've got a habit that has come up relatively recently, within the last kind of 10 or 15 years ago, is the focus around solution selling. And I've got no issue with solution selling as a concept, except what does a solution need? Well, in order to have a solution, you've got to find a problem. And one of our counterintuitive features of our research is that, in actual fact, selling at the point when somebody tells you they've got a problem is also less persuasive than waiting a little while. So one of the things that we found very, very early on within the research was that a lot of sellers will hear a problem and go, aha, Mr. Ms. Customer, I can solve your problem. Here's how I can solve your problem. But what we also learned was that people live with problems. And we know that in our home life, we know that we probably have a car that's a little bit too small for the size of our family, and it's all a bit difficult if we want to go anywhere and get all the luggage in, as well as all the children and all the rest of it. But we still don't go out and buy a new car. We kind of go, oh yeah, we'll put it off to another day, put it off to another day. Well, in business to business selling, people behave exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So you don't want to just dive in at the problems. And then the other issue that we saw a lot was that I talked about questions and asking questions earlier, and people have been drilled in the habit of asking open questions. And our research included tens of thousands of observed sales calls. So we're not talking about half a dozen here. We're talking about tens of thousands of sales calls in different industries, in different languages, in different countries around the world. And what we found is that there is no improvement in outcome based on the number of open or closed questions that you ask.
So open-ended questions are not the magic bullet.
Absolutely not. So you can ask closed questions if you ask smart ones. Now, would I say to somebody, ask closed questions all the time? No, clearly not. But you can have a lot of impact with a well-timed, well-worded closed question. And so, again, we're unpicking some of the habits that people have got into. And they're well-intentioned habits. They've not got into those habits because they're idiots or because they're ignoring something that they should have learned years and years ago. These are things that people have been taught to do, and secondly, for the most part, they kind of work. They're not wrong in the sense of you will never get a sale if you do these things. It's just that very often you might get a sale at the expense of offering a major discount or making some other concession in order to get the deal over your competition.
Yeah. So, Robin, it's clear that if these are habits people have developed, and my gosh, I'm sure they've seen really good salespeople who also happen to have a good gift of gab, or really good salespeople who are great at asking open-ended questions. That must be the secret sauce, how they're doing it. So if people are sort of entrenched in these behaviors, is there unlearning that's got to happen if you're working with more seasoned salespeople and trying to help them improve? How do you bridge that unlearning bit?
I think the first thing around the unlearning is, I actually front it up when I'm working with groups and when I'm working with sponsors of projects within organizations. I actually say to them, look, unlearning is more difficult than learning. Going through that process of having spent 5, 10, 15 years in a sales role and developed a whole host of habits, which I'm now coming along and go, by the way, here's the research that you should have read before you developed all these habits, which tell you why these don't work or don't work as well as the alternatives. That takes time and it's difficult. So, we use an approach of giving people plenty of opportunity to practice. I mentioned earlier on, and you mentioned in your kind introduction, the idea of synchronous and asynchronous learning. When we used to do a blend of learning, we used to give people static e-learning and go, here you are, here's some content, go through that stuff, answer the quiz at the end, and then you'll know some stuff before you come into the classroom. In actual fact, what we're able to do now is to help people to integrate that into their world. So when we say, here's a definition of a kind of behavior that we use, give me an example from your world. Give me an example from when you do those things. So we're incrementally looking at the behaviors individually. We're taking it slow. We're giving people within those group sessions, because we've done all of this work beforehand using the platform to enable people to understand the research and to practice ways in which that works within their environment. We can then say, okay, so now we're going to practice that within a simulation exercise.
Yeah.
And we're going to record that simulation exercise so that you can listen back to it and analyze your performance and think about the behaviors you use. And the more that we do that, the promote guys talk about this idea of crawl, walk, run, and it's that sort of stuff. And that extends not only to understanding the definitions and the vocabulary, the behaviors that we're talking about, but it extends to applying those as well. So we'll say, okay, try one behavior. Okay, now go try that one behavior with a customer. Come back and tell us how it went. Okay, now try another behavior. And how about combining it with the first behavior that you tried? Now go do that with a customer and come back to us. And we talk about that repeatedly over the course of that learning journey so that people are trying one thing. We always say, try quantity and then quality. So just get into the habit of asking a different set of questions.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and look at which of those questions were really effective and which could have been better. And let's increase the number of the really good ones and reduce the numbers of the ones that are the right sort of question, but could have been asked in a better way. Yeah. So that's the basic premise of the way that we help people develop.
Wow, that's terrific. And I certainly know from my own trying to learn how to become a better tennis player, I have to undo some of the stuff that I've done for 40 years on that tennis court, and it's not easy. So this notion of incremental practice and crawl, walk, run. So let's try it in a safe environment first, and then let's put one in and try it and put in some more and try. But Robin, what you're talking about, doing this practice over and over again and developing new habits, that takes time. And I'm sure that one objection you must run into is, hey, can you that would nice, Robin, but we need some results quickly here. So how do you overcome the objection of our salespeople are too busy to do all this practice?
I mean, that's absolutely a challenge. But, I've never met a sales manager who's not looking at the month end or the quarter end and looking at the results and having sleepless nights and all of those things. So we know that the window of opportunity to build skills is limited.
Yes.
And so the first thing that we focus on is trying to get people to understand that if you just count the results, if you just count the sales figures, the numbers and the revenues that you generate, if you've lost the sale, it's you ain't ever getting it back. Once the customer said, thanks very much, we're going with somebody else, you're not getting back in the door there. So it's much better to have a set of mechanisms and metrics which will help people to intervene before it gets to the decision. So whether or not that's using call planners, or whether or not that's practicing the behaviors that you're going to use and the way you're going to ask that question with a supportive individual within the team or a coach or a manager or whoever that is. That idea of working towards a behavioral frame, which means that it's not all about the numbers. It's not all about the results. The results are important. I get that. I get that the job of the salespeople is to generate revenue and to generate revenue profitably. But actually, how you get to that point matters. And it matters primarily from the opportunity to intervene from a coaching perspective.
Yes.
It matters because it means that the individual can learn from their experiences. What's the main reason that people say they haven't got a sale? Main reason they haven't got a sale is it's to do with the product, it's to do with the marketing, it's to do with the pricing, it's all the things that as a salesperson I can't control.
Yeah.
And we're asking people to look at, well, what are the things you can control? What are the behaviors that you use when you're in front of an individual which help you get to those results? And that doesn't necessarily take any more time, because once we've gone through that process of introducing the behaviors, we've given people safe spaces to practice, All of the other learning happens on the job. It happens
Wow.
in the work.
God.
And yeah, we might encourage people to do something a little bit different. Maybe we're asking them to share some ideas with their peers and to give feedback to each other. Maybe we're training their coaches to work with them alongside that process. Maybe my team and I are working with them on that process as well, because sometimes we coach people way beyond the length of the learning journey as well. And that's part of the process of saying we need to reflect on what's happened. And we need to think about what we're going to do next. And we need to have some measures in place to measure those incremental improvements, because the sales results are not the be all and end all. That, as I said, that doesn't mean they're not important.
Yes.
But it's like driving a very fast car by looking in the rearview mirror. And I would frankly like to look at the road ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is look at the road ahead.
Mm-hmm.
If it's in the mirror, it's behind you.
Well, I can see, and I hear what you're saying is that if I'm so focused on moving the needle, I really have to understand before I can move the needle, what is actually going to move that needle, and what are all those steps I need to get up to this practice. And it sounds like you really can embed it in the flow of work. So people are learning as they're doing, and they're doing as they're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for some organizations, that's a significant mind shift. That comes back to whether or not they started out with that pharmacy mindset that we talked about earlier. If they think they're going to come out of that training room, that conference facility, and hit the road running and able to revolutionize their sales performance, then they're wrong. There are a whole set of contexts and conditions which apply back in the workplace. And that will be about, the way that targets and quotas are managed. It will be about the way in which managers support their people. It will be about the conversations that they have with their senior people within the organization. And it will also be about the degree to which individuals feel comfortable in going, I need some help with this. I need some assistance to really think about, I'm struggling. We have this. One of the behaviors that we talk about is what we call need payoff questions. So need payoff question is the end in Spain is need payoff. And that's where we're asking people to tell us what their requirements are. So it's based on a conversation that we've had up to date. And then we go, so if we could solve all those problems, what would the future look like? Uh-huh. What would that mean for you? How would that help you to do? What else could you do if you could save that money? What else could you do if you could increase productivity?
Yeah.
So we're asking people to start to talk to us about the value of solving the problem, not just making the unpleasant stuff go away, but what they get in return, the payoff.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a difficult skill for people.
Yeah,
that's difficult for people to learn quickly. So that's one of those areas where it takes time and effort over many more weeks sometimes than our learning journey. But nonetheless, we create an opportunity. We leave the platform open. We encourage people to use that as a straightforward experience sharing place. But we also need the managers to be on board with that. We need their teams to say, actually, I can go to my boss and my boss will be able to help me to prepare for this next meeting because the last meeting wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and I don't want to make the same mistake twice. So, it's that kind of approach which makes the difference.
Yeah.
And therefore, there has to be a sense of trust, a sense of vision that actually, if we do this the right way, the revenues will follow, the profitability will come with that.
Right. So again, it's that focus on behaviors, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is, because I can change how I behave. I can't tell someone how to behave differently. I can only encourage them and give them a vision about what they might do differently.
And would the message be that you've said sometimes the needle will move because of marketplace conditions, economy, new products, whatever.
Yeah.
Is the message is that the right behaviors will see you through a downturn and the right behaviors will also help you leverage an upturn?
Completely. And one of the things that we've seen, and one of the things that I guess I'm proudest of in what we do, is that because we focus around the value, what we see is that individuals are significantly less likely to offer discounts or rebates or whatever you call them in order to secure the deal. Because they've talked to people about business people do not spend money on things. business people invest in products and services which help them do business.
Yeah.
And as soon as you make an investment somebody somewhere is going to say, well, what's my return? And the job of a good salesperson is to be able to specify what that return is. To be actually able to say, look, at the moment, you are losing productive time. Every time you turn the machine off, it will cost you X. You will not have to turn the machine off with our product. Therefore, it will save you X. And you can use that X to do this, 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 and this.
Nice.
And suddenly we've got a conversation there about what am I going to do with the savings that I make, or what am I going to do with the increased revenues that I have, or what am I going to do with the other efficiencies that I manage, rather than how do I solve this problem, which means that we're working loads of overtime and I'm not getting home to put my kids to bed.
Yeah. I want to come back to a notion that you spoke a little bit about the platform, using this digital platform and extending the learning journey. One of the things I know that I've seen change, and you probably over the last, we've had decades in this training business, is that, back when we did event training, get people in for 3 days, dip them as hard and as deep as you can, and then send them away. It's like, we have no idea what happens to them next when they get back to. But it strikes me that this platform, you're able to reach. You've got reach now into the workplace, and you have reach into the workplace for weeks, if not months.
Yeah.
Am I hearing that right? That it's that reach that really lets you keep people practice, get more feedback, practice some more, leverage that feedback?
Absolutely it is. And of course, we're external to our customers, to the people who use our programs, to the people who attend our sessions and participate in our learning journeys. We're external to them. I cannot make anybody do that.
Yeah.
What I can do, though, is I can gather data first and foremost. So you said earlier that people want to count the numbers and things like that. And we can give them alternative numbers. We can say, look, here is the percentage of completion of this learning journey amongst this cohort, for example. So we can talk to people about, well, what else could you do to help them to complete that? What encouragement and support can you give them to make sure that they've got the time and the space to get on there and complete things? But also it means that we can pick up items of good practice and share that, amplify that across the group.
Yeah.
And we can identify individuals who might be struggling a little bit and intervene appropriately. We can encourage others to intervene, because part of our job, as with any consultancy business, our job is to make ourselves redundant.
Yeah.
So we're encouraging line managers, coaches, internal trainers, whatever they are, to say, look, you could intervene here and help this individual. I've noticed that, Fred's really struggling to complete a decent call plan. How can you help the individual to do that better? But so that embedding within the kind of business as usual world is important to us. And that's why our learning journeys have got more time after the event than they have before it.
Interesting. So I've heard you say two things about the learning journey. I want to quickly capture those before I move on to this topic of managers. But you said certainly one way of reducing the time investment is you've embedded all this practice into the flow of work, the stuff they're going to be doing anyway. They're just going to be practicing it differently. And another is, when we had people come to workshops, we usually spent 90% of the time pushing content down their throats and 10% of the time action planning or practice. And it sounds like you've really reversed that. You've given them a little bit of stuff they need independently on their own time. So when you do get them in groups, you've got time to practice.
Our learning journey, and it is, it has evolved and developed and become more, I think it's become improved, but, I'll let others be the judge of that. But it's become more part of just how we do the things that we do, because of the technology that's available to us now that wasn't a few years ago. So fundamentally, we have three phases to all of our learning journey. We have acquire knowledge, we have skills and practice, and then we have workplace transfer. And those three phases might happen in that linear fashion. So you might do a bunch of stuff at the start where you learn about our theories, and you might then do some skills and practice stuff with our facilitators, get feedback and record yourself or get feedback from your peers, and then you might go and do the workplace transfer. We always used to deliver a virtual version of most of the programs that we run, but quite frankly, there wasn't the demand for them. We used to run maybe a handful every year. Suddenly the pandemic hit and we've gone
Yeah.
100% virtual. And what that allowed us to do was to split those three components, the acquire knowledge, the skills and practice, and the workplace transfer, into mini learning cycles.
Cycles of those, exactly.
Yeah, so we could do an acquire knowledge bit, which is just about the stuff we're going to cover on module 1. And module 1 will last for 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
And then we're going to give you some jobs to do, which is to go tomorrow and have a meeting with a customer and use this behavior.
Wow.
Go and do that, see whether that works. And then come back on the next session. Tell us on the platform, tell us what happened, reflect. And then we'll gather those reflections together and we'll talk about that as a group when we've all got together, because we've now got 10 or a dozen experiences. And then we'll do the same again. So we're
many
constantly
cycles.
doing that kind of mini cycle and getting people into the habit of practicing one behavior at a time, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the way to change the habits that you've built up, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. But if you want to adopt new habits, you've got to work at them.
And I think what that many cycles of this knowledge, skill, and practice, workplace transfer, many cycles of it does, it gets us away from, years back, we'd give people pre-work. Pre-work was the stuff that that nobody else was going to do, so they're going to cover it anyway. And if you were going to do it, you do it on the plane on the way to the meeting, and then you take a nap or watch a movie instead, because heck, why bother? No one else has done it.
And I'm smiling as you say that, Rob, because in actual fact, I am known in the organization of the man who will shoot you if you say pre-work.
Yes, and we have to, exactly, and we have to erase that word from our vocabulary, don't we? Exactly. Because it isn't the pre-work, it's the first step.
It's the work.
Yeah,
there's no pre about it. It's the work.
Yeah, and I do think, Robin, we're making headway on that as a profession. We're getting used to this. Bits of knowledge, then practice, then in many cycles of that. I want to turn now, in the little bit of time we have remaining, to, I know from previous conversations with you and hearing you speak that you guys make a strong effort to engage managers, sales leaders. Can you speak just briefly to that, and how do you do that in a way that really leverages and focuses your impact?
Well, let me give you a couple of things that we do. So first of all is that I get involved in doing quite a lot of, we call them top team events. I mean, it can be whatever you want, really. But in one organization that I was working with recently, they called them the Guiding Coalition. And this is where we speak to the senior leaders within a division, within a department or a country level. And we tell them what's going to happen. So we introduce them to the whole idea of the learning journey. We introduce them to the platform. We actually set up a platform for those sessions so that they get used to what it looks like and feels like. And then when we're actually in the session and we've kind of gone through what it is that we're asking their people to do, we give them a very simple exercise. And that simple exercise is, what are all the things that you could do which means this wouldn't work? And we call it the sabotage exercise. And we just ask them to say, okay, if you were determined to spoil this, to make this a failure, what would you do? And we get them to write it down. They've got to share that with their group. They come back and they make presentations to say, if we were going to make this less successful than it could be, we would do the following things. And then I get them to plan action about what they're going to do.
Okay.
Because until you've actually surfaced all the ways in which managers can actually screw this up, it's really difficult for them to think about, well, what are the good things that I could do to actively support it? Yeah. You've got to kind of be honest about that. And I think the second thing is that when we're talking about team leaders, we're talking about people who are going along sometimes on sales calls with their sales colleagues and all the rest of it. We have to get them out of some bad habits as well.
Yeah.
We have to get them into a coaching role. So we would typically train the managers first. We'll take them through exactly the same program that their people are going through. And then we will take them through a coaching program. So where we will look at, okay, so now you've understood the behaviors. How can you help an individual who's got a problem with behavior X or behavior Y? How would you recognize that's what the issue was? How would you manage a process of supporting that individual to focus on that and to give feedback to them? How would you do that in a way which was much more pull than push, So we're not asking you to be experts. We're not asking you to be the person who's got all the answers. We're asking you to elicit from the participant, from your team member,
Nice.
what it is they could do differently. And now let's try and do that asynchronously via the platform.
Gotcha.
So we're getting them to embed their input into the platform. And one of the things, clearly all of us have got problems with people continuing to the end of the learning journey at some point or another. People drop out. There's too much other stuff going on. I'm busy writing this bid and it's a really big opportunity. There's all sorts of reasons why people don't attend to the other part of the learning and development journey that they're on after the classroom bit is finished or after the virtual sessions are finished. But one of the things that really works to drive engagement is if you know that your manager's going to be on. And if you know your manager can see how much progress you've made. Because it is a truism and it is very simple, but the reason these things become cliches is because they're true. What gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
And having a manager on there, not necessarily beating people up because they're only at 60% completion and they should be at 80% completion.
Right.
Not talking about that. I'm just talking about the very fact that somebody is watching, somebody is monitoring that, somebody is interested, somebody is sufficiently enthusiastic to make time in their busy schedule to support you. The least you could do is make time in your schedule to be supported. So there's a kind of virtuous circle there which happens because the manager is engaged and visible and on the platform. And that's one of the things that we don't always get it. Don't get me wrong. There are some organizations with whom we work where they go, our managers can't be involved in that.
Sure.
And we have to come up with alternative ways of supporting that. But what we've then found is that actually peer-to-peer mentoring works really well as well. But, managers are unquestionably important. It's essential that they at least have a clear awareness and are bought into what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because whenever we've had programs that haven't worked or we've had solutions which have delivered less stellar results than we perhaps thought they could do or should do, usually somewhere at the back of it, there will be a management mindset which is holding people back.
Yeah. Well, Robin, it sounds again like you mentioned earlier in the conversation that people have to unlearn some stuff. I hear you doing the same thing. You're taking those managers through an unlearning process. And then giving them some very simple tools that they can use to continue the engagement. So it isn't just one or two ride-alongs; it's continued feedback at a behavioral level.
Absolutely, and those ride-alongs. That's a classic one. Very, very big in some cultures rather than others. Some countries and some industries rather than others. But we know most sales managers have at some point in the past been salespeople. Yeah. And their comfort zone, the area where they feel really, really comfortable is being a salesperson. So you take your manager along to a sales call with a particularly high-value client, somebody who's really strategically important to your business, that you make a good impression, that you win some business, get your foot in the door, whatever it is. Very often, that sales leader will then step in and take over the conversation.
Yeah.
And the feedback at the end of it, whether implicitly or explicitly said, but the implicit feedback is, see, if you could just be more like me, you'd be a better salesperson, which is about the worst feedback anybody ever got.
Sure.
So what we want to do is to define what it is that the sales manager is doing if they do have the opportunity to observe a sales call, a live sales call. And of course, it's to observe. That's, there needs to be a process where the salesperson may choose to invite the sales manager into the conversation. But it's got to be their choice. It's got to be them saying, what do you think, Rob? Would you like to give me some help here?
Yeah,
rather than the sales manager kind of going in at the first notice and taking over. Because that's not a learning strategy. And we have to, again, refocus the mindset away from the immediate results with this customer towards the development journey that this individual is on.
Terrific.
And invest and be prepared to recognize that it's not always going to be a steady flow upwards. Yeah, sometimes there are going to be dips in that road. And that's okay. That's part and parcel of the thing that you've signed up to, because you're helping people to change their behavior.
Yeah.
Our strapline is very clear. It is change behavior, change results.
Change behavior.
That's
Well,
what we're in the business of doing. If we help
yes.
people to change their behavior, you will change the results that you get.
Yeah. Robin, it's been great talking to you about this, and it's just so clear to me that you have really, with this notion of a learning journey and using this platform and engaging managers in it, you've really changed the paradigm from teaching to performance improvement. This is not training, this is performance improvement. So
it absolutely is. Yeah.
Terrific stuff.
And that's what we're there for. One of the things that my colleagues get very bored of me saying is, our job is to help people do things differently and do different things. And if we don't do that, we've failed.
Perfect. That's a great way to sum this up. Well, again, Robin, thanks for your time and your insights today.
You're welcome.
You've been most helpful, and a lot of gems in here. So
thank you for inviting me on. It's been a great conversation.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll do it again.
I hope
Thank
so.
you.